To become powerful in the United States, you don't necessarily need to be president, but you can use presidential elections as strategic times to gain power. What do I mean by this? So, we're going to take a trip back to 2020 during the Democratic primary, in which Joe Biden, amongst a field of crowded candidates, was currently running to be president. As we all know, he eventually won that nomination and went on to become the current president. And we're waiting to see how he does in 2024. But how did Joe Biden get there? And how can you use a presidential election to become powerful? Well, I'm going to go over a South Carolina congressman named Jim Clyburn. Jim Clyburn is the epitome of being a simple congressman who can have a lot of power and sway if you know exactly how to handle your position. In the Democratic primaries, you have New Hampshire, Iowa, and South Carolina that are the keys to gaining momentum in order to clinch the Democratic nomination. If you remember back in 2020, Joe Biden didn't win New Hampshire or Iowa. New Hampshire went to Bernie Sanders and Iowa went to Pete Buttigieg. However, he was able to win South Carolina, and it is all because of a famous guy named Jim Clyburn. Jim Clyburn is South Carolina's low black Democratic congressperson. And in fact, he has a very interesting career and has delivered well for his district, which is South Carolina's 6th district. Even as recent as April of 2022, he was able to bring his district over $115 million in federal money, no doubt to how he helped Biden clinch the nomination. So what happened? Well, Biden needed to pull off a win, and if he didn't win South Carolina, it was going to be over for his campaign. For whatever reason, Jim Clyburn decided that Joe Biden was his guy, and he endorsed Joe Biden and even helped him on the debate stage during the Democratic primary process. When Joe Clyburn endorsed President Biden, he won South Carolina and went on to win almost all the states in Super Tuesday. This was credited to Jim Clyburn's endorsement in driving high African American and Black turnout. So isn't it interesting that someone as little as a Joe Clyburn, who's just one congressman, can have so much power? But how did he strategically use it? Well, one, the fact that it is a large primary state, one of the top 3 in the Democratic process, gives it a lot of importance. It means during presidential elections, Jim Clyburn can flex. Now, he is the only Democrat on the congressional level in South Carolina. So he effectively runs the state. The state is mostly Republican, who Clyburn is known to have actually negotiated with. In fact, there's been some controversy around his negotiation with Republicans. When they were doing redistricting come the 2020 census, he actually wanted his district to envelop the majority of the Black people in South Carolina to ensure that his district was safe. Now, this worked against a lot of Democrats who had hoped by splitting up the Black vote in his district that they would have chances to gain other congressional seats or other seats on the state level as well. But Clyburn did not want that. He's perfectly fine owning his fiefdom. And that is sometimes the key in American politics, and one thing that you really need to understand around power dynamics. We often think that the president of the United States is an overly powerful position, but it's only as powerful as the favors that they are able to give and hand out. So Jim Clyburn is the epitome of that. Had this man not have endorsed Biden in the 2020 primary, there would be no President Biden, which is why the 6th district in South Carolina continues to get a lot of federal money. On the flip side of that, Jim Clyburn knows exactly what he's doing by keeping his district a safe district for him to run. And so much so that, in fact, he's actually endorsed Biden again for the 2024 election cycle and said that he sees no reason for President Biden to step down. So depending on where you are in the power process, you don't necessarily need to be the top guy. You just need to finagle your way into the system correctly to understand how people gain power. In America, you gain a lot of power through helping people in the presidential election process. This is also very similar to someone like an Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren, who's very popular or not so much in the crypto community for anti-crypto stances, is very powerful because just like Jim Clyburn, she actually helped Biden win the election. How did she do this? She was, after all, running against Biden in the primary. But a lot of her voters who were very progressive were actually siphoned off from Bernie Sanders' camp. And if Elizabeth Warren had dropped out of the campaign early enough, all of her votes would have most likely gone to Bernie Sanders. If you do some quick Googling and look at some of the statistics, enough people voted for Elizabeth Warren to the point where had her votes been all converted to Bernie Sanders, Bernie Sanders would have possibly won the nomination and beat Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders would have actually done very well. So because Elizabeth Warren decided to stay in, she no doubt knew that she would be hurting Bernie and helping Biden. And she probably negotiated with Joe Biden during that term, during that phase of the election cycle, which is one of the reasons why she's able to get what she wants a lot of times at the federal level. Elizabeth Warren, after all, is the reason that Gary Gensler, an old-time friend of hers, is now the commissioner of the SEC. There are no coincidences in politics. Sure, there is luck, but luck favors the prepared. So if you really want to understand power dynamics in the United States, you have to understand that the United States is broken up into different political and power centers, especially at the state level. And depending on the strategy around your state and how strategically it is involved in election cycles, you can flex a lot of power. Jim Clyburn and Elizabeth Warren, albeit just one senator and one representative, both from Massachusetts and South Carolina, respectively, can have a lot of power and a lot of influence depending on the bets that they make during the presidential election process. So this means that during the 2024 election cycle, you really need to be paying attention to who is backing what candidate and how they're going about doing so. Further, the people who make the wrong bets, look forward to how they're going to be treated depending on who wins the presidential cycle. In United States politics, it's important to note that no position is too small to have power. You just need to be in the right position at the right time, at the right moment.